we whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord King James, by the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, Defender of the Faith, and so on, having undertaken for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith, in honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, do by these present solemnly and mutually, in the presence of God and of one another, covenant and combine ourselves into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation, in the furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof do enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, offices, from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general use of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience, in witness whereof we have here underscribed our names at Cape Cod, 9th of November, in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord, King James of England, France, and Ireland, the 18th, and of Scotland, the 54th, A.D. 1620. But soon a most lamentable blow fell upon them. In 2 or 3 months' time, half their company died, partly owing to the severity of the winter, especially during January and February, in want of houses and other comforts, partly to scurvy and other diseases, which their long voyage and their incommodious quarters had brought upon them. Of all the 100-odd persons, scarcely 50 remained, and sometimes 2 or 3 persons died in a day. In the time of the worst distress, there were but 6 or 7 sound persons who, to their commendation be it spoken, spared no pains night or day, but with great toil, and at the risk of their own health, fetched wood, made fires, prepared food for the sick, made their beds, washed their infected clothes, dressed and undressed them. In a word, did all the homely and necessary services for them which dainty and queasy stomachs cannot endure to hear mentioned. And all of this they did willingly and cheerfully, without the least grudging, showing their love to the friends and brethren, a rare and worthy example to be remembered. 2 of these 7 were Mr. William Brewster, their Reverend Elder, and Miles Standish, their captain and military commander, to whom myself and many others were much beholden in our low and sick condition. And yet the Lord so upheld these men that in this general calamity they were not at all affected with sickness. And what I have said of these few, I should say of many others who died in this general visitation, and others yet living, that while they had health or strength, they forsook none that had need of them. I doubt not that their recompense is with the Lord. But I must not pass by another remarkable and unforgettable occurrence. When this calamity fell among the passengers who were to be left here to settle, they were hurried ashore and made to drink water, so that the sailors might have the more beer. And when one sufferer in his sickness desired but a small can of beer, it was answered that if he were their own father, he should have none. Then the disease began to seize upon the sailors also, so that almost half the crew died before they went away. And many of their officers and strongest men amongst them, the boatswain, gunner, 3 quartermasters, the cook, and others. At this the captain was somewhat struck, and sent to the sick ashore and told the governor that he could send for beer, for those who had need of it, even should he have to drink water on the homeward voyage. But amongst the sailors, there was quite a different bearing in their misery. Those who before, in the time of their health and welfare, had been boon companions in drinking, had now to desert one another, saying they would not risk their lives for the sick among them, lest they should be infected by coming to help them in their cabins. If they died, let them die. But the passengers who were still aboard showed them what pity they could, which made some of their hearts relent, such as the boatswain, who was an overbearing young man, and before would often curse and scoff at the passengers. But when he grew weak, they had compassion on him and helped him. Then he confessed he did not deserve it at their hands, for he'd abused them in word and deed. "Oh," said he, "you, I see now, show your love like Christians indeed to one another, but we let one another lie and die like dogs." All this while the Indians came skulking about those who were ashore, and would sometimes show themselves aloof at a distance. But when any approached them, they would run away. About the 16th of March, a certain Indian came boldly among them and spoke to them in broken English, which they could not well understand, but were astonished at it. At length, they understood by speaking with him that he was not of these parts, but belonged to the eastern country, where some English ships came to fish. And with some of these English he was acquainted, and could name several of them. From them he had gotten his knowledge of the languages. He became useful to them in acquainting them with many things concerning the state of the country in these parts where he lived, as also of the people, their names and number, their situation, and distance from the place. And who was chief among them? His name was Samoset. He told them also of another Indian, whose name was Squanto, a native of this part, who had been in England and could speak English better than himself. After some time of entertainment, being dismissed with gifts, in a little while he returned with 5 more, and they brought back all the tools that had been stolen, and made way for the coming of the great chief, called Massasoit, who about 4 or 5 days after came with the chief of his friends and other attendants, and with Squanto. With him, after friendly entertainment and some gifts, they made a peace, which has now continued for 24 years. Squanto stayed with them, and was their interpreter, and became a special instrument sent from God for their good, beyond their expectation. The settlers, as many as were able, then began to plant their corn, in which service Squanto stood them good stead, showing them how to plant it and cultivate it. He also told them that unless they got fish to manure this exhausted soil, it would come to nothing. And he showed them that in the middle of April, plenty of fish would come up the brook by which they had begun to build, and taught them how to catch it and where to get other necessary provisions, all of which they found true by experience. Later, Squanto fell ill of Indian fever, bleeding much at the nose, which the Indians take for a symptom of death. And within a few days he died. He begged the governor to pray for them, that he might go to the Englishman's God in heaven, and bequeathed several of his things to some of his English friends as remembrances. His death was a great loss. So they began to consider how to raise more corn and obtain a better crop than they had done, so that they might not continue to endure the misery of want. At length, after much debate, the governor, with the advice of the chief among them, allowed each man